Now, as promised, in this lesson, we are going to look at going through your property checklist. This isn't something to be afraid of. It's something to enjoy, have conversations about, and really learn about what it is you thought you wanted before you started on this journey versus what you are looking at in the future, as well as those who are involved. So don't be afraid. And remember, as I said, what a great position it is to be in that you're looking for a property that could one day be your own. So let's dive into it. I'm going to go on to see, you're going to see in the screen, you're going to have your own version of this, so I'm going to go through it just to give you an example. Firstly, you're going to see an absolutely handsome property buyer. You're going to have to get over that, okay? Because we have to focus on the job in hand. We're going to look at locations. When you're looking at the location, I want you to just put down the areas you think you want. So if you've grown up in a certain area and you long to be in that particular location, put it in. If you think you might want to be in another part of Dublin or a part of Ireland and see what it's like, put it in. This is kind of a hypothesis. It's to get you to put down on paper what you think you want and then work through the list and then really assess whether that's actually going to be an opportunity or whether in reality you want to look at something else that's different. So put that in. We're going to move past the handsome buying agent and then into the type of property. This just gets the wheels in motion. This gets the creative juices flowing. Do you want an apartment? Do you want a house? End of terrace? Mid terrace? This is the kind of thing that gives you an opportunity to put down what it is you think you want. Again, it's not about figures. It's not about the absolutely perfect property that you're going to find right now. It's about getting your thought processes down on paper, however, digitally if you're doing it online. Then it's going to be the number of living spaces. Now, if you're coming from abroad, living spaces sometimes encompass bedrooms, but what I'm talking about here is separate to bedrooms. Do you need a dining room and a kitchen? Do you want open plan? In this new commuting era from working from home, do you need to work remotely? Do you need a space that you can escape to where you don't want to be sitting either at the kitchen table or under the stairs Harry Potter style? Write it down, get a feel for what you think you want space-wise. Then, after your living spaces, I want you to look at bedrooms. Is it one bedroom? Is it two bedrooms? Is it one where it could be a bedroom and a studio at the same time, or it could reconfigure as you need it? But just get a very basic idea of what you think it is you want. And again, much like my introduction, keep in mind those other incidentals that happen. As we always say, we make plans and God laughs. So when you're looking at your lifestyle now versus the future, just take stock of what you may be thinking about doing, but may not have verbalized to someone else. If that be a pet, if it be children, if it be guests, if it be renting a room, just keep it in mind. This is a WC is the Americanized term for all you Americans who are looking, called water closet. It essentially means a toilet. So do you want, if you're in a house, do you want a toilet downstairs? Now, neither is bad or neither is good. A lot of people prefer having a toilet downstairs for when they have guests or from an accessibility point of view. But that doesn't mean that if you buy a house that doesn't have a WC downstairs, that you can't potentially put it in. But just for now, we're going to jot down our wants and wishes. So just get clear on whether you want a toilet downstairs or whether that's something that's very important to you. We're moving along to showers, en-suites, bathrooms, preferences. When you're looking at this, you might say, I want a 2-bed, but I'd love an ensuite. Or I'm happy with the 2-bed if we've got a nice big bathroom that everyone can share. Or a 3-bed with an ensuite, whatever it may be. Just jot it down and it just gets the conversation started about how you're going to live in that particular property. If it's applicable, think about a garden. This may not always be the case with an apartment, but the concept is quite similar. If you're looking at a house, take a view to the size of the garden, the orientation, the type of space, what your expectations are before you got your budget for your mortgage versus what the reality is telling you now. And if you're looking at an apartment, maybe think about the communal grounds. Maybe think about a rooftop garden or a communal landscaping area and what would appeal to you from that sense. So just keep it in mind. Then accessibility. If there is someone in the family or yourself has accessibility requirements, it's good to be clear on what you have to have, because then that's going to inform you better as to when you're looking at a property. And firstly, if it has everything you need on day one versus spending money to make it suit you later on. So just get clear on that. And again, there's no right or wrong answers. It's just about writing it down and noting it so it doesn't become an afterthought later on. Off-street parking. Depending on where you live, you're going to have parking maybe as part of the property or it's going to be on street. Write it down, get clear on what it means. If you're in an apartment block, I want you to find out whether there's a parking on the title or whether it's general. So you may have an older development built in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and it's kind of a first come, first serve, don't worry where you park, everything's okay. That's totally different to being in Dublin city centre or in a very central location, and you literally get assigned a space that is written onto your title and it is what it is. If it's in a house, you want to find out whether the off-street parking really does fit one or two cars. So if you have family over, will they be able to fit, or are there going to be challenges? If there's on-street parking, you want to then look at it and say, well, is there going to be enough room for me when I have family over? Are there going to be people commuting? Little things to keep in mind as to the day-to-day practicality. Next, we're looking at access to public transport. If this is key and you're commuting to work, or you've got kids that have to go to school at certain ages, just be aware of what it means most to you. So if you're looking at public transport, you're thinking to yourself, I have to get XYZ bus every day. This house is a 40-minute walk as opposed to a 14-minute walk. Therefore, it may not be something we want to look at. So just get quite clear on what it is you're thinking of needing now versus what may be coming down the line. People sometimes think they need transport because of the what if. But the reality is you could live on the route of the best bus in Ireland and you may have no intention of getting the bus. So ask yourself that really honest question. Am I bothered getting the bus? Is it a key part of my life? Do I want the Dart? Do I want the Lewis? Do I want to park and ride so I can drive close enough and then be able to get the bus or the Lewis or relative transport into town or into work, wherever it may be? Be mindful of commuting as well, just to keep that in mind. Make a note of what matters most to you, because this then informs your decision better as you go forward. Your age preference. So we live in an age when if you break your phone, your iPhone, your Android, whatever it might be, I'm not going to take sides, you can go and get a new one or you can get it repaired. Some people take the same approach to houses, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with it, but it's all about the juice being worth the squeeze. So ask yourself at this stage, do I want a brand new out-of-the-box house that comes with new appliances, built to a certain standard, and you certain expectations? That's going to limit what you're looking at and where you're looking at. That's okay. Just get clear and start that conversation with other stakeholders that are part of the process. You may want a classically styled house. You may want period features. You may want high ceilings. You may want a bit of charm. Just put it down, because how this works as part of your hypothesis is you thought you wanted this, but if I was to bring you to your ideal property today, you might get a rude awakening. You might think, wow, this is going to cost me more than I thought, firstly to buy it, and secondly to keep it. So write it down and just get clear. And I want to stop you here at this particular juncture and say, if there are two of you that have two opposing views, take a brief moment to not judge one another. Write both of your ideas down and talk it through. A glass of wine, a beer, a coffee, a tea, another coffee. No need to go aggressive. Just give each other the opportunity to talk about it. And it can be a lot of fun because you then get to understand where someone else is coming from. So jot it down. Then we're going to be looking at condition. So as with before, some people don't want to do anything except bring their toothbrush. Other people love a project. They want to get in, they want the overalls on after work, and they just want to paint a room or plaster a part of a wall, and then that becomes part of their story. So use this as a jumping off point to maybe take a look at your Pinterest board. You have maybe lots of ideas that you pinned over the last 5, 6, maybe 10 years, who knows. And in practicality, that may not work for your certain stage of life. And that's okay. That's all part of the process. And what this is seeking to do is to give you an opportunity to talk through all these things you thought of in theory versus practice. So get it down, talk about it. And again, as before, don't judge if someone else brings something to the table that you may not either understand at the beginning or agree with. A fight is going to solve nothing. And we're in this together. So, on to the next. Scope to extend either outwards or upwards. Now, unlike apartments, it's generally going to be more houses that this is going to apply to. But when you're looking at apartments, I want you to take the same viewpoint to the space you're buying. Because if you think you're going to need more space on day one by looking at an apartment, maybe it's not going to be suitable for you. There may be apartments that are older that have a larger footprint that allow you to cordon off space. So for example, if you were looking at an apartment from the 60s, 70s, 80s, again, they were built at a time when the footprint was bigger and you had a little bit more range to each apartment. You may be able to look at something that has 70, 75 square meters, and you can cordon off part of a bedroom or a hall or a communal space that can then become something else. So when you're looking at this particular question, keep that in mind. If you feel somewhere is too small on day one, it is too small. Now, that's not to say that you can buy somewhere small and dinky and charming in a location you love, but you have to know why you're buying it and what you're buying into. And that's key here. If you're looking at a house, just really get familiar with the concept of if we were to. I always say get curious. So what if? If we could go out, would we? Would we lose a lot of garden? If we could go up, would we? And what would that entail? Would that be something we would envision for the future? So just keep that in mind. If the house ticks all the boxes on day one, happy days. You can set about paying for it and enjoying all the surprise bills that happen once you take over. But these are the times to ask yourself these questions, and it also gets you kind of really drilling into the things that get you passionate about why you're buying a property, because this is what it's meant to be about. It's not meant to be torturous. It's meant to be enjoyable. It's meant to be a challenge, because at the end of a challenge is that end result, and it really is worth it. So we're going to look at amenities. So do you like to go for pints? Do you like a gym? Is Pilates key to your life? Is a dog park a vital part of your daily routine? Write down what it is that makes your life so special to you, and then reverse engineer it. So if you're looking at the amenities and you say, well, I want to live in such and such a location, but I have to be central for this. Neither is wrong, but all it does is get that conversation started about what does that mean? Because there's a price to be paid for everything. When you're looking at something, you could buy a larger property further away, but your commute is different, the effect on your time and traffic is different, and your social life is different. But then when you're at home, you're home and you've more space. The opposite happens when you're in a central location. You generally don't have as much space, but the price you then pay for that lack of space is you then have centrality and you're around all the amenities that you may want. So just jot it down, have fun with it again, and I'm going to judge people on their coffee choices and gym choices, just to be clear, but just have fun with it. So when you're looking at your must-haves, this is kind of this is my cutoff. My must-have is X. So if your must-have is a generous sized living room or a south-facing garden or off-street parking for 2 cars, 1 car, whatever it may be, write it down. Again, there's no need to start a fight, just put it on paper. Yours could be parking, another could be orientation. Just put it in to get clear on where you think you're at. Then, after that, you're going to look at your bonus. So this is where you can say to yourself, well, what if there was X? Put it down on paper, and you never know what may come when you're looking at a property. It's not to say you're guaranteed to get a bonus garden room or an extension that's been put in that could suit a perfect, a home office or whatever it may be, or a gym, or dare I say a man cave. You never know. But this is where you get to write down, well, what if? And that you never know could materialize. And your price range. So I want you to look at this as a maximum. So when you're looking at your price range, if your approval is 300,000, 400,000, 500,000, don't put in 800,000 hoping that you're going to get money from nowhere, and don't put in too low, because then it's going to skew what you're really looking at. Give a very simple overview figure for now. So if your approval is for 400 grand and you've got 400 grand to play with, put 400,000 in, and then you get to reverse engineer and start to see what's on the market. It just gives you a marker as to where the market is right now versus where it is when you're actually looking. And your means of purchase. It's very simple, but it kind of just reaffirms where you're at. So for anyone who's looking at this, I'm going to clarify, cash means that you are cash. It's not that you have your deposit in cash in the bank or that someone is giving you a certain amount of money. If you are cash, it is all cash. So let's assume it's 400 grand, 500 grand, 600 grand. You have that amount in the bank right now and no one is lending you any money. Finance is you have a mortgage in place, you have a loan in place that's ready to go. And part of that will be your budget, your deposit, everything else. But when someone is looking at you as a buyer, if you're €100,000 cash and 400,000 mortgage, you are finance, you are mortgage. Because the reality of this is you still have a lender involved. But if you have 300,000 of a mortgage and 200,000 of cash, just put that in as the figure and note that you're going to click finance, but you have that top up of cash. Again, this isn't going to go anywhere. So it's just more for you to get clear on your real figures on the ground, because you may think you have 500,000 to spend, but 500,000 may not include your stamp duty, your closing costs, your legal fees, and also the surprise figures that will absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, come out of nowhere. Even if you're buying a new property, it could be the sofa that you forgot you had to buy. It could be the television. If it's an older property, it could be a boiler service that explodes the day after you buy it. It's just to get clear on where your finances are and just jot it down and be very mindful of it. And this then keeps you, I'm going to use the term honest, when you're then looking at the next stages. Because as I say, if you're looking at something and your budget is say 400,000 or 500,000, we don't need to be looking at something that's 7, 8, 900,000. And I equate it to a car. If I have a budget for 20 or 30,000, I am not going to wander into a Ferrari dealership and say, what can this money get me? That's not to diminish what your budget is, but you'll tire yourself out by looking at wants and wishes that may not apply to you right now. So just get clear and use that as kind of your North Star as you're moving along. If you're a first-time buyer, there are certain grants available. There are certain incentives to help people. Now, at the time of recording this, they're always changing. So I'd encourage you to either reach out to a broker and get the up-to-date information, or look at any prospective material that your lender may have given you. And it's important to be aware of what that means, what the challenges are as part of getting it, whether it applies to you, and what areas it may apply to. Because it could be a new home scheme, but there may not be any new homes where you are. So you may be wasting your time looking in the areas you're looking at. So just get clear on that at any given time. Obviously, we're going to assume you've got your mortgage in place. You've done the work. You've sent over your finances and you've gone through all that. If you're unsure at any stage of your mortgage, don't be afraid to reach out to your lender or your advisor and ask them a question, because it's in their interest for you to obviously draw down on your mortgage, but they also have to work for it. So you want to keep in touch with them, ask them if the landscape is changing, get their opinion on anything that you may need to keep abreast of. So just keep in touch with them and, keep on top of things. And then your additional budget. So if you've had that conversation with the family member where they've promised you 20 grand to upgrade the property, have they actually given you the money, or have they forgotten about it, or is that something that's in the works? Or do you hope that you have a bonus coming in that's then going to give you a buffer to do that work when the time comes? Just get clear on that additional budget. Now, I would also say don't muddy the waters by saying you got 30 to 50 grand that you want to spend on a property, and then something happens with the car and you're dipping in and dipping out. Let's take a very broad stroke idea of, we're going to have 20,000 to upgrade the property or 100,000 to upgrade the property. Here's our ballpark timeline and here's what we're working with. You can get more granular as time goes on, but for the purpose of this exercise, I just want you to jot down in one place all the different components of what you're thinking of. And then it just means it gives you firstly a talking point with yourself when you're really reflecting, with those who are involved, and also people whose opinions you ask. Because when you jot something down and you maybe show it to someone else, it then gives them an opportunity to say, well, you know what, you're looking at this, but that doesn't really apply. You think it's going to cost this, but it's going to cost more or less. So it just gives you a kind of a talking point and a frame of reference. And your timeline to completion. So this is good to keep in mind if you are moving from abroad and you have certain requirements of when you're coming back. So you don't want to be coming from abroad assuming that you landed today, you have approval in place, and you'll buy your property tomorrow. There is time involved in looking, in the conveyancing, which is the term for the sales process with the legals, and then also for getting the keys, which obviously in Ireland, it tends to be a how long is a piece of string, and you just have to go with it as best you can. But once you're informed and you plan ahead, it does make it a bit easier. If you're staying with family, it just means that you can have that open dialogue about them supporting you at this point in time as you look for a property. And because there is a proposed end in sight, I'll use that term, sometimes it can free up that underlying tension that may be there for fear of people not knowing what's next. If you have the conversation with someone who's letting you rent or letting you stay in their home, you can go for dinner, have a coffee and say, look, I am looking, I really appreciate your support, and this is what I'm thinking timeline wise. And you obviously do your best to work alongside that, but it also gives those involved that understanding that you're really trying to do the best you can in setting out your stall. If you're renting, there are certain parameters you have to stay within as well. There are certain notice periods you have to give, but you want to be very careful to over-assume your time, in my opinion, and be mindful of any delays. When you're giving notice, be very clear about your timelines. It's obviously quite nuanced in terms of the type of landlord or the owner of the property you may have. They may have an open-ended agreement with you where they don't worry, but they also may be in high demand and you don't want to plan to be out in 3 months' time and then find that you actually should have needed 6 months. So just be clear on your timelines as best you can. We don't have a crystal ball, but it's just getting you to really think about that. And the last question is for those of you who aren't first-time buyers. Are you in a chain? And the reason I've put this here is sometimes people go shopping, looking for a property, attending viewings, imagining themselves in this other property, and they still have a property to sell. My first thing would say to you, if you're in a chain, you have to go through a separate process of assessing what level you are at. To reach out to me, but part is you don't want to break your heart by finding the home of your dreams now and knowing that you still have to sell your property. So I put it in place where most of you who do this course may not have a property to sell, but if you do, you just want to tick the box, and then it means that your journey takes a little bit of a different path, but it gets you asking those questions as to what you need to do to be ready to sell, if you need to sell. If you don't have a property to sell, you just click do not sell, don't worry about that. But again, this isn't for anyone else but yourselves, but you're just reaffirming your status, and you're kind of ticking boxes like a to-do list. I've got this, I've got that, I've got the other, what's next? So I hope you found that property checklist useful, and you can fill it out, ask any questions you like as we go along. You can send me emails, WhatsApp, whatever suits. And in the meantime, I wish you the very best of luck. And equally, I want you to remember to have fun with this process, because like I said, you are going through a checklist of something that you potentially get to enjoy for the rest of your life. That's really exciting. So go at it.